My name is Josh Wild, and I'm a member of the iProver Advisory Board and also the former Editor-in-Chief of an IP information platform called IAM. That was all about how to monetize and create value from intellectual property. And one of the people that we spent a lot of time studying and interviewing over the course of the 20 years that I was with IAM was my interviewee here, Ruud Peters, who was the Chief Intellectual Property Officer of Philips for, was it 15 years?
15 years.
15, 1999.
1999 till the end of 2013.
There you go. So for 15 years, Ruud was one of the pioneers in IP value creation at Philips. I won't tell you all about what he did because he's going to tell you all about what he did, but suffice to say, I think he's probably one of the most pivotal figures in the development of intellectual property as a business asset, as opposed to a legal right. And over the next 25 minutes to half an hour, what we're going to do is discuss what Ruud did specifically as a Chief Intellectual Property Officer over the course of his time at Philips, how he sees the role of the Chief Intellectual Property Officer and how it's developed over recent years, and how AI is going to impact not only the role of the Chief Intellectual Property Officer, but also the in-house role, the role that in-house IP departments play in corporations large and small around the world. So probably not that much to talk about. Hopefully we'll get through 15 minutes at least. But let me begin with a question, Ruud, about what is the Chief Intellectual Property Officer? It may be a term that a lot of people here, especially if they're not involved in IP on a day-to-day basis, are familiar with. How is a Chief Intellectual Property Officer different, say, to a head of patents or a head of IP or a Chief Licensing Officer or roles such as those?
Yeah, good question. Throughout my time at Philips and also in the years thereafter till now, I have talked to many heads of IP in various companies around the world. And once you have talked to them, you know whether you have talked to a CIPO or talked to a head of IP in a traditional way. And if you look at what are the main differences between the two, then I think it's a matter of mindset and a matter of focus based on that mindset. If you look at a head of IP in what I call the more conventional way, then it are people that focus mainly on two big areas in their daily jobs. First, it is building a portfolio that has as its purpose to protect the products of the company, so that if some other company copies their products, that they have something in their portfolio that they can use against the copycat. And in doing that, they are not very active in steering the invention inflow, the flow of invention disclosures that comes to them. And they're also not involved in steering the innovation process in general in their company. They look at it and together maybe with normally a patent board or a patent team, they select the best out of the income stream, and then they build a portfolio in the hope that ultimately later on they have something that they can use. And of course that doesn't lead to an optimal result. And secondly, they focus on, the term already felt this morning, freedom to operate. They do these studies that take a lot of effort, a lot of time, of skilled attorneys to see whether anything that they are developing is making use of third-party patents. And if they find some, they try to get around that in order to reduce the risk that once they commercialize the product, that the product is being blocked by somebody else. So mostly they are using their portfolio in a defensive manner, and they are reacting in a reactive mode, so to speak. It overcomes them, and they are not proactively steering the whole thing. So that's different from what I call a CIPO, Chief IP Officer. That's also a person that normally operates at a different levels in the company. There's more and more frequent contacts with senior management and including the board. So they know very well where the company is going, in which direction the businesses are going. And based on that holistic perspective, they develop a vision on where the IP should go and how that IP should support the business in their growth and increasing their profitability. So they have a different focus. It is not that they look at IP as a goal in itself, but they look at, well, what can IP do to support the business in whatever way possible. And based on that, they have a more future-oriented approach to building a portfolio in a way that they say, how can we build a future portfolio that can, at that point in time, generate most value for the businesses? So they work it backwards.
Okay. Is it fair, I mean, this is a huge generalisation, but would it be fair to see the Chief IP Officer role as a business role and the Head of IP stroke Chief Patent Counsel role as a legal role?
Yeah, that's a touchy point for me. I don't see IP as a legal issue. Yeah. It's a tool to achieve something in the business. And from that perspective, it is more a business tool than a legal tool. And then means also that the Chief IP Officer is more a business role than a legal role. And that, what you see in many companies still is that the head of IP reports to the head of legal or the Chief Legal Officer. Yeah. And that already gives a different flavor to the job of head of IP than if you would have a Chief IP Officer that reports to one of the other functions in the board.
Yeah. So in 1999, were you appointed Chief Intellectual Property Officer of Philips, or did you assume another role and become the Chief IP Officer?
I didn't start as Chief IP Officer. I was just head of the IP department. But in the years before I became appointed as a head, I had traveled around the world quite significantly to Asia, Japan, Taiwan, Korea, and China. And I saw that the speed of the development there, the dynamics in the business was much higher than in Europe, and especially in Philips, and also in the IP department. So I said, if we don't change, we will lose the competition. And I have control over the IP department, so we need to start there. And I developed a plan to say, okay, how can we become better and faster in what we are doing and create more value for our businesses. So the first thing that I did was introducing process and project management. So we defined our key processes, with sub-processes, with workflow, and all the steps in there. We appointed process owners and KPIs for each of them, and we started measuring. So because we were really slow in the things that we were doing, and I also had made a round of discussions throughout the company with the board members and the senior executives in the company, and the message that I came back was confirmed that we were really slow. So that's the first thing that we need to tackle. So we start measuring and we say, okay, we are going to become faster. And we defined just how long every activity should be. And we moved back from where we were until we were at the target speed that we had. And that remained not unnoticed inside the company because the R&D and the business people, they said, hey, something is going on there, something is changing there, and that helped us for our people to become more involved in the projects in R&D because they felt, hey, these guys are now faster, and that helps us because then we need to pull them in. Yeah. And from the one came the other because that gave us momentum to introduce further changes.
Yeah. But you're putting your head above the parapet then, aren't you?
Sure.
You're actually making yourself visible to the board or to the higher ups. And that, I mean, that creates challenges, I imagine, as well as opportunities.
Absolutely. I've told you that story once before, but maybe it's interesting to talk here about that. I had an idea about how we should use IP in a better way in the company so that we could create more value. But for realizing my plans, I also needed a lot of money and I needed more people because I wanted to do things differently. And I talked to my boss. He was the head of research and also CTO of the company, and he was also a board member. And I asked him, well, this is my plan, and but I need more money, more people. But he said, okay, you ask quite a lot. I cannot give you a green light for that. You need to go to the board. So that was my first appearance in the board. And yeah, to make a long story short, I was grilled there, of course, with questions about my plan. And in the end, the CEO at that point in time of the company said, okay, you get the benefit of the doubt. And then it came, I want to see you back every quarter in the board here so that you can tell us that you indeed deliver on what you have promised us to do. So the accountability came on top of that, and that is, of course, something that I think also differentiates a SIPO from a head of IP, because the last one focuses on staying cost control, staying within its budget. So that's a different thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite a leap, I guess, for someone to be managing a patent portfolio, managing a trademark portfolio, to suddenly appearing in front of the board each quarter, being asked very hard questions about why aren't you hitting targets, or what targets are you going to create in the future?
Absolutely, and well, it was a two-way street, because being there every quarter, it also gave me the opportunity to educate the board in IP matters, because you cannot expect that these guys know all the things about IP, but you have the opportunity then to explain them how things work, and yet that takes time, and sometimes you need to be lucky that things happening, and then you can demonstrate on a case. So here you see how things work, as I've said. And then it helped them to develop their thinking and understanding of IP, and that helped me tremendously.
Absolutely. And it's really interesting for me, the process that you're describing. You use the word luck. And the thing that I would observe about the Chief IP Officer role, even now, is that it does very much seem to depend on the personality of an individual. That it's not an institutionalized role. It's not a role that a company will go out and recruit a Chief IP Officer. That Chief IP Officer will do the role for 10, 15 years or whatever it is, and then a new Chief IP Officer is recruited. It's very much the CEO gets it, the board gets it. There's someone who's dynamic and ambitious in the IP role, and all those things need to come together in a way that doesn't exist, for example, with a Chief Technology Officer or a Chief Marketing Officer. Those roles are much more institutional, it seems to me, than the Chief IP Officer. Do you think, is that a fair comment?
I think it's fair comment so far, yeah. The difficulty with a role of CIP officer, you need to have network inside the company. You need to be good connections with the board members. You need to have good connections with the executives, the leaders of the businesses, because you need to know what's going on there. There's always something going on at top level in a multinational company. You need to have your external network with other companies around the world, competitors and non-competitors. You need to have your discussions with tool providers, service providers, and you need to have a view on your own organization. So there are a lot of things that you need to be able to combine to get to know, to understand what is the direction of the business, what is the direction of technology, what is our ambition level, what are our investments, what is going on in the IP field, where do I need to step in, where where do we need to use our influence, etc.
Yeah, and that's very much dependent on an individual at this stage rather than sort of institutional sort of mechanics within a company.
Yeah, one of the reasons I think for that there is no education for chief IP officers or senior management in IP, because if you look at the education that is available in the IP field, it is more the traditional IP training for drafting and prosecution and registering rights, but not much on the follow-up side.
That'd be interesting to know, for example, sort of an organisation or a school such as IMD itself. I wonder how much IP training or looking at IP as a business asset is actually goes on.
There are people here that should be able to answer that better than me.
I wonder. I mean, given the value that can be created from intellectual property.
Yeah, well, as you may know, Geoff, I'm connected to the CIP. Center of Intellectual Property in Gothenburg. There they tried to set up a kind of MBA for IP. And there you hope to get those people that ultimately can fulfill that role.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, we've talked about the Chief IP Officer role and how it's developed, or how it developed with you at Philips. Obviously, this is an event about artificial intelligence, AI. How is AI going to change the role of the Chief Intellectual Property Officer, do you think, over the coming years?
I think if I talk about AI, and we've heard about a lot already, it will drastically change, in my view, the world of IP. It will change the work of attorneys in this field drastically, even going further than I think we've heard. And by that, it will also change the role of CIP. Because it will move up to a higher level and it will move up to speed.
Yeah.
If I look at my time at Philips, when we were making what we call IP strategies for a couple of years, how long and how much effort and how much people were involved in collecting all the data that we needed to start as a basis for, okay, what are we going to do? It was a process throughout the whole year. And I see Michael was in my organization nodding because she was one of the people that had to do that. But yeah, it was a whole process that we've designed, an enormous amount of data we needed to collect. It is not only the IP data, but also from ourselves and our competitors, for all the different businesses, business units, etc.
Yeah.
But also, what are the R&D investments? Which products are we going to invest in next year? What are the key technologies, etc. So, and marketing information we needed. So we collected a lot of data. So, and for that reason alone, maybe a little bit sidetracking, we already I think it was back in 2006, we established our own business intelligence unit inside the IP department to collect IP data, but also to collect marketing data that we needed to make our plans.
Yeah.
So all that, I think, I would have loved to have AI, because that whole process would have been much faster and likely also much better than we could have, than we did it in the past.
Does that mean that you talk about 2 years to get a program up and running, to establish, to do all the research and everything, and in future it's not going to take 2 years, it's going to take days or weeks or what have you?
Weeks, I think. Yeah.
Does that mean fewer people working inside in-house IP teams?
Yeah, it will go faster, but it depends on you. Most likely, if you have all that information, you can do more. You create more better insights, newer insights, which enable you or help you to start new to do new things or to start new activities
Yeah.
or to take new approaches.
Yeah.
And for that you need people that understand that and can drive that.
Yeah.
So the whole IP field needs to move to a higher level.
Yeah.
They need to move up from draft and prosecution, doing FTOs, because that work, I think, ultimately will be taken over by tools that can do that consistently and with high quality.
That's interesting. So do you think that creates a situation where different kinds of people will be moving into IP and looking at the role of Chief Intellectual Property Officer as a viable future option?
Absolutely, because one of the things that we did in my organization, well, early on, we said, well, we need to have different kind of people inside the IP department that are not attorneys. We technical people, standardization people, business developers, so people with a different background than IP background.
Yeah.
And that, cross-fertilization worked out very well. It helped to broaden the views of the IP people working with these non-IP people. Otherwise, you work in a kind of cocon and isolation. And because you need to talk to them in a different way and use different terms, different terminologies. And I think that you will see more and more in the future, because, and then we may go to a different direction, but I have always experienced that the tools that we needed were not commercially available.
Right.
I always had a need for better tools than were out there in the marketplace. So what we often did was developing those tools ourselves in the hope that someone later on would develop it commercially, so that we could take it on board. Because developing your own tools is costly and takes a lot of maintenance cost. So in the end, you don't want that. You want to have commercial tools. I expect that we will see the same thing happening in the AI field, that companies will have a need for certain tools that are not out there yet, so that they will develop themselves. I already see that in one company that I'm a board member in and a partner in. It's a consultancy company, and they are developing their own AI tools to help them in their consultancy work. And I see the same happening in the IP field.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I guess it takes us back to what we were talking about before, about the opportunity for business schools and at an earlier stage to start talking about IP as a business asset and about how to create value from IP. AI will actually speed up that process.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. That's fascinating. Is there a danger, though, that we're overhyping AI? That we're talking about all these incredible solutions and everything's going to be much faster, and IP is going to move up the value chain and all the rest of it. But actually, what's actually there with AI at the moment isn't going to allow us to do that, and we're still waiting for the major breakthroughs to actually take us to the place where we want to be.
Yeah, I'm always an optimist, but I also know out of experience that it normally takes longer for things to really settle in. I expect that in the IP field it will take 5 to 10 years before we really see the large-scale rollout or use of AI tools, and that it has been established and that you can no longer do without those tools in order to be relevant in your own organization.
So if we sort of jump forward that 5 years, or the 5 to 10 years, what is your vision of the Chief IP Officer at that point, and of the in-house organisation that Chief IP Officer is overseeing? What does it look like to you?
It's always looking in a crystal ball, but it's difficult. But I think that that person will have even a more important role than maybe I had, is that he will be deeply involved in helping finding the right direction for the company, on the basis of what he knows about the IP field, the technology field in general, innovation in general, and he will be instrumental in steering the direction of where investments will be made, where the company thinks that in the future will be able to discriminate themselves from their competitors.
Yeah.
And that will be a really high level role, where close interactions with the people that are responsible for R&D, but also with the people that are responsible for strategy, future strategy and direction of the company.
Yeah.
And the people, he will need people to support him in that, people that understand also what he is doing, and understand the strategic directions that they are looking for. And then you will have people below that that will be good in implementing that, but at a higher level than the attorney work that is being done today.
Absolutely. So I mean, it's an opportunity, but it's an opportunity that comes with challenges. But it's an opportunity that if you embrace it, there's extraordinary value to be created.
Absolutely. I always look at the opportunity because the IP field in general, that's my experience over the last 30 years or 35 years, when you come up with a new idea, attorneys are the best possible people to bring up all kinds of problems with your idea. I see a lot of people laughing here, so that confirms my experience. And they are not looking at the opportunity. And because they see all these problems, they don't put things into action. They don't translate an opportunity in things. And they don't think about, well, how can we make it work to our benefit?
Yeah.
And that is something that I see also in the early reactions today when you talk with IP attorneys about AI tools that's going to take over patent drafting, patent prosecution work. They can never be as good as we are because, and then they come up with a whole list of things. But then I say, okay, but that's again taking the threat approach and not the opportunity approach, and say, okay, if we have these tools, how can we use these tools to our benefit, and how can they make our life easier, and how can we be more effective in what we are doing? And that, I think, is what needs to happen with AI tools.
Brilliant. Well, Ruud, thank you very much indeed for that. I don't know if we've got time for questions or...
We have lunch break next, so any burning questions?
Okay, well, join me in thanking Ruud Peters for a fascinating insight into the Chief IP Officer role. Thank you, Ruud.